What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Disc and Dice podcast. My name is Paul, and as always, I am joined here by Timmy. How you going, Timmy?
I'm very well, thank you.
And we are also joined by, to the delight of our fan base, JT. How are you, JT?
I'm doing great. That's a lie. It's not as always joined by because I wasn't here last week.
That's true, and everyone will be so glad to hear that you're here. Firstly, we want to say thank you to everyone that donated to JT's legal funds, and we are very, very happy to say that all the charges were dropped. Again, we still can't talk about them because, like it was pretty bad, but he is here for the foreseeable future at least. He can't leave the house. He's got one of those like bracelets around his ankle, that kind of thing, but yeah, JT, we're really glad to have you back.
It's great to be here. I'm just, I'm glad I'm not, reporting live from somewhere else. I'm happy to be in the room at the moment, and thank you to everybody for the support. For the uninitiated, I'm sure these two covered it all in the last episode as to what's going on.
Boy, didn't we just. Look, JT, I suppose we don't want to harp on too much, but I'm sure the listeners would be interested to know, do you feel like you learned a valuable lesson through this whole ordeal?
I learned an expensive lesson because legal fees and whatnot, it's if that's valuable, then yes, but
expensive for everybody else who donated to your legal funds. Goodness.
Yeah, I couldn't have done it without you guys. Thank you very much.
You're really gonna have to go back and listen to that episode now.
I really am. I'm so curious. But yeah, I don't know what to say now. I'm just like I'm so lost but intrigued. So yeah,
we were seeing if you were gonna treat it like a game of Gloom where you just start building onto the story, just run with it.
We could be here for so long, knowing our little banter intros. It's just continues and continues, and then by the end of it, you're like, "Oh, all we've talked about is JT's legal battle."
Yeah, for anyone for whom this is your first episode of Disc and Dice, if you go back and listen to the last one, you might get the joke. But yeah, this isn't what we normally do.
No, normally we talk about video games. Funnily enough.
We do. And maybe we should just jump into that after all of that banter. And JT, you're going to kick us off today. Is that right?
Is it right? I don't know. I don't know what to believe anymore. Am I real?
What's the video game?
Yeah, what video game? I have been getting into something that any listener who's been with us since I've started the pod is the Doom saga, and I've finally caught up to where the series is at in Doom Eternal, which was released this year. So that's another little bit of a milestone for me, because normally I'm playing games that are a little bit older or delayed by a few years, like games from 3 or 4 years ago. But I'm happy to announce that I actually am playing a game that was released this year. So I feel really current. I feel really young and invigorated because I'm playing a game from 2020. But I'm really, really loving Doom Eternal. I haven't finished it outright yet, and I have only done the campaign. But it is, let me just say, it is a hell of a lot of fun. I don't know. I just had to throw that in there. It is great fun.
If that's a reference to something, I don't get it.
Are you serious?
It's a reference to Doom because you go to hell.
Oh, okay. That went straight over my head.
Wow. Okay. Whatever you say, old man Paul. But I think the last time I spoke about the Doom series was the 2016 entry. And I remember saying that was what I considered the high point of the series so far, taking all the other games into consideration. But Doom Eternal just does that and builds on it even more. So really, really, really enjoying it. And I think I will be for quite some time, because unlike the last one, there's a lot of extra content that's slated to start coming out in free updates and some paid DLC. So I'm really, really looking forward to some of the stuff that they've announced moving forward after I finish what I've got into in terms of the campaign.
What has actually changed then? If you said it's kind of like a continuation of the first Doom reboot, like, does it feel different in any way?
Yeah, it does. It feels similar because it's a very much like it's a closer build on what engine it was made on for that 2016. But obviously, like things like the graphics are just through the roof enhanced over what that the last entry was like. But more so, the gameplay is a bit faster, but not faster in terms of just run and gun. It's like there's a lot of like parkour sort of involved. There's a lot of like running and grabbing ledges and swinging off of beams so you can like fly through the air and do combo kills. And it's really ramped it up in terms of like how you go about the combat situations. And on top of that, just exploration and like a lot of secrets and extra little things you can do along the way that are optional, but obviously give you benefit if you do choose to do them. And it has just really capitalized on a lot of that kind of stuff that the last entry had, but in a very, very diminished manner. So they've really just fleshed it out a whole bunch more. They've taken a little bit more of a like the campaign is a little bit more serious, but the other aspects of the game, like I was mentioning, like you can find different unlockables and things. Um, those are a little bit more on the funny and light-hearted side, and I'll get into that a little bit later on because there is really a lot to cover in terms of what the game offers
Hey,
in its current state.
Hey, I had a question just while you were kind of talking about like how it's grown from the last one. And I was curious, being that like, Doom 1 and 2 didn't really have that much of a storyline connect. It was kind of like the same thing over again. And then Doom 3 was quite a departure. So I was wondering, being that, this has come hot on the heels of Doom 2016, and that game was like really like quite beloved, well received. Has this one actually got like a throughput in terms of like the plot? Like, can you trace a line from that to this in terms of the story?
Yeah, so this is like a direct sequel to 2016, but they've massively fleshed out the plot and the lore of the Doom franchise in terms of not just saying like you go to hell, but they've got like the cities of hell and the people like all the different commanders of hell who are all intricately sort of tied in with one another, and how there are other factions at war with hell and other influences and people on earth. Um, they've really, really ramped that up as well. So it's not just a pretty straight through storyline. 2016 was pretty cut back in that regard. There was enough for the campaign, there was enough to drive the game forward, but this has really thrown it all out there. And it's one of those instances where it really has piqued my interest, and I gauge that with a lot of things on whether or not I choose to go to like the wiki pages afterwards to find out more about what I'm playing or watching. And I've found myself doing that a lot while I've been playing the game, because obviously the game explains a lot, but it doesn't necessarily, draw excellent timelines of what's happening. And so I've found myself really, really getting into the nitty gritty of the Doom franchise lore that's been massively fleshed out by Doom Eternal in particular. They've really gone back and explained a lot of the stuff from even the previous games that had no explanation. So they've really put all that kind of stuff in there.
That's cool to hear, because I seem to remember when this game was being marketed that I noticed there was a couple more of those kind of story trailer type things, which was a bit unusual for a Doom game. Like you were saying, Timmy, I sort of remember seeing them sort of showing like cinematics and stuff like that, which I didn't expect, because that first game was kind of the selling point of that was the fast run and gun gameplay, and this seemed to have a bit more meat to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just makes the game that much more enjoyable to play as you're going through unlocking these like pages of lore that you pick up along the way that explain not only like locations and uh, eras gone by and situations and battles that happened, thousands of years ago, but it's explained like a bit more behind like just every enemy you encounter. Like you might encounter like a zombie or a Baron of Hell, which is one of the types of enemies. And it doesn't just say this is this kind of monster and here's its weak points. It gives you a bit more of a layout of where that enemy fits in the greater story. So I've
That
really, really been enjoying reading up on stuff as I'm playing the game.
is that a bit like the way you've described that makes me think of like the Shadow of Mordor game.
I
How
never played that, but
okay.
yeah.
Paul, are you familiar with that one at all? How they've got like the different generals and stuff, and it kind of like you get a bit of their history and it changes over the game as well.
Yeah, I am familiar with them. I'm probably most familiar with the gameplay mechanic where those generals would like come back from the dead and stuff like that. But yeah, I kind of know what you mean in terms of like giving those sort of like bosses along the way a little bit of character and personality, if that's what you're going for, Timmy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah, I obviously JT said nothing about like those generals changing because they might have defeated you and then you respawned. But yeah, just kind of them having a little bit more of an actual like rank and a system and a world they're living in kind of gave me that impression.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It sounds cool though. It sounds like, sometimes those bosses, I think especially in like maybe like first person shooter games and stuff, they can feel a little bit contrived. It's like it's time for a boss because this is every 3 levels we have a boss or something like that. It's kind of nice when that stuff makes a bit more sense in the world rather than just as kind of a gameplay mechanic that they throw in every now and then.
Yeah, and it does feel that way. Obviously it's not pretending to be not a fast-paced FPS where you just blow everything away. It's not pretending not to be that, but they've just added this extra element of storytelling atop that just to help it push it through and make the environments and the general story a little bit more interesting for the player. And it really does a great job of that. It doesn't overdo it, it doesn't underdo it. It's just in that nice the level it needs to be for the type of game it is.
When we talked about Doom 2016, there was something that I think we overlooked that in our group chat afterwards, we kind of chatted a little bit about. So I want to bring it up again now to ask you about it, JT. But the soundtrack to at least that first Doom remake is so damn good. And I wanted to know like your thoughts on kind of both games. Like what do you think of the sort of like crazy metal soundtrack that they put together for it? Because as far as I know, it's not like none of it's licensed. It's all like original music for the game.
Yeah, it's from I can't remember the name of the artist now. It might be Mick Thompson, something like that. I could look it up very quickly. But I'm really glad you asked that because the 2016 soundtrack was great. However, I've actually listened to both on Spotify and YouTube just as I've been doing other stuff, and I think the Doom Eternal soundtrack is much better than the 2016 one, mostly because it has a lot more songs that feel like actual songs and not just the ambient stuff. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
Doom Eternal has the same thing because there's parts of levels where you're not fighting and you're sort of doing a bit of exploring. But this soundtrack seems to have more of that chunky riffage that you would expect from this type of game. And I really, really like the songs in this one. They're a little bit more memorable for me, even though there's no lyrics. But I like this soundtrack a bit more. And it seems to flow with the gameplay a little bit better as well. obviously you run into a bit where there's an arena battle, so you've got lots of enemies to fight, and it switches on the heavy soundtrack. But it's a little bit. There's a lot of, it's not just like downtime mode where you're exploring, so everything's sort of quiet and spooky sounding, and then there's heavy. There's a lot of things in between in terms of dynamics for what kind of thing you're doing. So you might be, just cleaving through a few enemies and not a whole big arena full. And so the music is a little bit more up tempo than what the exploring music might be. And it does a really, really good job of blending in seamlessly with one another. There's no hard stops or anything. It all is orchestrated really well depending on where you are in a level or what you're doing.
That's cool. I think I ended up listening to the Doom soundtrack because we talked about it, and so I was looking for some music for the episode, and I ended up just adding it to a playlist on Spotify, kind of like you said, and just listening to it anyway. So I'm even more intrigued now about Doom Eternals.
Yeah, I think and you're a metal fans from a long time ago, and I'm sure you still probably listen to metal every now and then, but this is just it's just a good solid metal soundtrack. It's very easy to listen to. I know that might sound weird, but it's an easy metal track to bop along to, even if you're not playing the game. But when you're playing the game and there are those great battles and it kicks in, it just kind of like awakens that primal urge in you a bit, and you're just like, all right, it's time to get down to business. So yeah, really appreciate it for that reason.
Doom soundtrack, easy listening metal. You heard it here first on the Disc and Dice podcast.
Yep, go out, buy your granddad a copy. But in terms of the game itself, one thing I really, really do want to mention is just how great the environments are. 2016 felt a little linear for the most part. You had the hell areas, and then some of the base areas, that are on Mars, and obviously they're like human and high tech. This has such a huge range of environments. It goes from because Earth is getting invaded in this one. It's got massive open environments of destroyed cities with these massive titans walking around in the background, and in one point you're actually on the back of one of them because they carry these. They're called titans, but they actually carry these huge bases on their back, and the very start of the game is set in one of those bases. And at the start of the level you're like, why is everything like moving around a bit, and why are there these massive like thuds every now and then? And then you leave that area and you look back and you're like, oh my god, I was in this thing that was like 200 stories tall, like running around. And then you jump into a city that's on fire and destroyed, and you're running through apartment blocks that are like really, really fully realized. They've really cut no corners in terms of the level design. And then you'll jump into hell, and hell isn't just sort of one template. There's all these different areas that are completely different. So there's like a city in hell, or there's a temple in hell that feels a lot different to all the other environments that are based in hell. And then you'll jump into, there's other areas. I don't want to give too much away, because I think this is a game that a lot of people might want to play for themselves. But there's other fantastic realms that are nor hell or earth or Mars, that are just beautiful to run around in. And so it's really, really stepped it up from the last game. I think they just had that much more in terms of manpower building the game, that they were able to just go fully, I don't even know what the term for it, but they were able to really, really spare no expense in terms of the level design.
Do you
so
think that
great?
Do you think that perhaps it was like the first one was really like a settler to show everybody we understand what Doom is and what you want from a Doom game, and they kept it very close to the original vision? And after that success, they felt perhaps a bit more emboldened to go a bit bigger with it?
definitely feels like that. And after the first one, they there's no way they can release that same kind of game again. The only option was to go up from what they had before, and so you really treated to a massive plethora of different environments, which are just great. And one thing I really, really like about the environments in particular is the color palette. So they've really drawn the colors for a lot of the environments from the older original Doom 1 and Doom 2 games, especially in the Hell areas and the Hell on Earth areas. Like they've pulled like a lot of like really deep reds and purples and greens and oranges and put them together, and it's almost like they've taken a screenshot of the old game and gone, cool, let's use all the colors in this and build environments based on that. So it's this really cool throwback to the games that were as well. So it's really, really cool to see that. Just on the environments though, one really, really cool other addition they've put into it is the levels aren't just like a linear progression through like a story. Every so often, sometimes after like one level or two levels or three levels, it puts you back into Doom Guy's home base. It's called the Fortress of Doom, and it's basically his house, but it's this massive floating base that floats in outer space just outside of Earth. And this is where you get to stop for some, before continuing straight into a new mission. You can do things like look at some of the collectibles that you've collected along the way. If he's got a room, you can unlock other things there. If you've collected these things called Sentinel batteries, you can power up different areas of the base to unlock new things, like new perks or new abilities, based on whatever room you unlock. There's like an area where it's called like a demon prison. So you go there to practice some of your skills in battle, and it's like kind of meant to be like these captured demons that the Doom Slayer just sort of goes and practices killing on. So it's like just cool little areas like that, and it puts a really nice break in the gameplay otherwise, because you get to you're not getting thrust straight into a new mission. You get to go back home, make some changes, and if you need to swap things out, that you haven't thought about, or unlock things, then you can go and do that. One really cool aspect to that area as well is there is a computer in his room that has the entire first Doom on it. So you can play Doom in Doom. And I think it's like a homage to that meme that's going around that's like, but can it run Doom? And I think it's like, can Doom run Doom? And yeah, so the answer is yes. And it's the full game. It's not like cut back or anything. They've just, the first Doom is probably a tiny file. So they've just added it in there. So it's crazy that they've sort of, fleshed that out and brought that over from the last one as well. So not from the last one, but brought it over from the rest of the series. So yeah, I really, really like that aspect of it. And the environment is cool as well.
That kind of hub area like that is maybe the last thing I expected you to say was in this Doom game, because the first thing that sort of sprung to mind there was like something like Ezio's villa that you get to kind of upgrade and build from the Assassin's Creed series. Like last thing I expected was like Doom Guy's mansion that you get to sort of play around in, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. Like it's a hub area, but it's one obviously you can build and unlock things for. So it's just a great addition.
I wanted to ask about the levels that you were talking about before and kind of the environments. In terms of the gameplay in those, do those changing environments affect how you play through the levels? Like, are there different mechanics that you have to kind of interact with depending on whether you're like on one of those planets or whether you're, like you said, on the back of one of those huge titans or whatever? Or is it more like sort of like a backdrop to what you're doing, but the gameplay is sort of relatively consistent?
That's actually a pretty good question, because I've never really thought about that as I was playing it. I think for the most part it's a backdrop, but throughout each level as you progress, there are new elements that come into play, like being able to cling to a wall and climb, and some of the parkour elements are slowly introduced over the levels. There is an exception though, and this was in a level that I was playing today, where it's an area of hell where all the souls go to get harvested, and that has a lot of. It's like almost like a gauntlet. So there's a lot of booby traps and tricks you can use to help kill enemies, but you also have to watch out for yourself. So I'm not sure if that's going to stick around for the later levels as well, but that is probably the exception to the rest of the game. So I guess that's probably the answer to your question is probably yes and no, but for the most part, it's not. It is just a backdrop, and yeah, obviously different environments have different enemies as well. I guess that's kind of within the realm of that question too.
Okay.
Now, JT, I want to get your feeling on something. Obviously, every single time we've spoken about Doom, I've mentioned how, although it's much derided, I really liked the horror survival tilt that Doom 3 took. And do you think now that we've had 2 games in the new trilogy that there's any chance of the third one they're just going to take an absolute left turn and give us some horror survival again?
I don't know. I would really like that because, like I said, I love this kind of Doom, but I consider Doom 3 a different kind of Doom, and I also love that Doom. So I would love to see them do that, but as probably not like a sequel to this, but a continuation of sort of Doom 3's timeline. Because you know how I was mentioning it's like almost considered sort of like an alternate history or an alternate sort of universe of Doom where you could be playing as like a different Doom Marine. I think that would be cool if they continued it on, to be honest, because I really liked that slow-paced sort of creepy Doom vibe that had.
So instead of doing like Doom, then Doom Eternal, and then Doom whatever, just do Doom 3 2?
Doom 3 2, yeah. Like I feel like I don't know how they'd go about really selling that it's like a continuation of that game, because I think it also would, if they were to bring out Doom, whatever the next name for the sequel is,
Doom
it would be
Infinity, I think.
Doom Infinity, yeah. It would be really jarring to have it all of a sudden go to survival horror mode. And I think that would really divide the fan base. I
think that would be like so funny though. It'd be like so meta, just like absolutely in keeping with the Doom franchise, right?
It would be cool. I'm all open to that idea. I think it's long overdue, to be honest. I would really like to see that.
Imagine if I'm just imagining like if they had that rep consistently, if we're up to like Doom 15 and everyone knows that every 3 Dooms they just throw everything out the window and go crazy. Like not every 3 Dooms is a survival horror game, but like sometimes every 3rd Doom is like a dating sim or something like that. They just go insane with it and no one knows what's coming.
It's just like Doom Tetris.
Yeah.
This Doom Eternal really like capitalizes on a lot of the tongue-in-cheek humor from the past Dooms, because at the end of Doom 1, I think it is, or 2, you find out that the reason that your guy is so angry is the demons killed his bunny rabbit, his pet bunny rabbit. That is legitimately part of the lore, and that is actually alluded to several times throughout the legitimate serious storyline in Doom Eternal, as well as some of the unlockables. So one of the things you can unlock is you unlock vinyls. I don't know how you guys say it. Vinyls, records for all from various past songs. So there's the first one you unlock is like one of the MIDI songs from the first Doom, and then there's one of the songs from Doom 3, like they've pulled it straight from the soundtrack from Doom 3, and they've given it like a proper cover and fake artist who has made that song. And then there's one for, I think, Doom 64, which is, or could be Doom 2, which is like something about his bunny rabbit. So it's like, it's definitely, that's part of the story. And they, I think they've just sort of, instead of retconning that ridiculous idea, they've just like gone, cool, whatever, that's part of Doom,
It's cool they just owned it.
They totally did. I love that it's in there.
I gotta say, I genuinely had no idea what you meant when you said vinyls. Like I was like, what possible word could that be? And I was thinking like VINNELS. It's like, what on earth?
My reaction was, that sounds like vinyls, but that can't be what he means. Hey, I got another question for you, JT, about this one.
Go.
What's the difficulty like? Like, I'm just curious because
Oh.
I'm not a sort of a person who plays for challenge, but I'm just kind of curious because of the gameplay of Doom, like it's such a twitchy, fast-paced thing. I feel like
Dude,
that's
I'm
got to
really
be a
glad
thing.
you asked that. I'm so glad you asked that because I would have forgotten about that. The game's fucking hard, and I'm on the easiest mode, and it's got like 4 difficulty modes, and then an ultra nightmare mode, and then some other mode where it's like permadeath. So, yeah, even on the easy mode, it is challenging, especially when you do some of the additional things you can do in a mission. So, um, that's going to segue into the thing I was sort of mentioning earlier. So one of the additional things you can do are these things called secret encounters. So you need to do a bit of exploration. Sometimes there might be a bit of a puzzle, and you find this weird glowing purple sack type thing. I guess it's meant to be like meat thing, and you activate it, and it does this little secret encounter where you've got a time limit to kill certain enemies. So it might give you like 5 seconds to kill like a bunch of dudes, or 30 seconds to kill this one really, really hard thing. And they are not easy. Even the first ones are really, really difficult. It then ramps it up even further um, with these things called Slayer Gates. So there are 6 Slayer Gates in total. You need to find a key in the level, and then you need to explore further and do other puzzles to find the Slayer Gate, which you then go through. It teleports you to this arena where it's just a wave after wave of enemies and they get progressively more difficult, and each Slayer Gate gets more difficult as you go through. And those are so difficult. But the great thing about the Slayer Gates and unlocking them and finishing them is they give you a piece of a thing to unlock in your hub, and that is unlocking this kind of super weapon. So you've got the famous super weapon in Doom, which is the BFG 10,000. However, there's an even more powerful weapon that you can unlock if you so choose to complete these Slayer Gates. It's a little bit like if you ever played Turok #1, throughout the game you could get these pieces of a gun called the Chronoceptor, and you could, by the very last level, you finally unlock it and you can use it to against like the very last enemy to make that battle easier. This is very much like that. So it's one of those really, really cool but very, very difficult things they've put into the game in terms of the rewards. But for the most part, the game is much more difficult than the last entry.
So these kind of areas you're talking about that are kind of like challenge areas, they're like optional. They're not sort of part of the linear path of the game, or they are?
No, they're not. They're not. They're actually quite difficult to find and come by.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, there's only a few of the unlockables that are blatantly obvious. You know, some of the lore pages and some of the you unlock these tokens called Praetor tokens, which help you upgrade your suit. Some of those are not so hidden, but for the most part, everything else you would completely miss if you weren't actively trying to find it. So another part of this game that I really like, and this apparently only just came in a update not too long ago, is the campaign multiplayer aspect that's sort of multiplayer but not. It's something that what happens in someone else's game influences your playthrough, and they're called empowered demons. So let's say in my playthrough I come up against a Baron of Hell or really any enemy that happens to actually kill me, the game will say, all right, this enemy has killed JT, and then in someone else's playthrough, it will spawn a empowered version, so a really, really ultra challenging version of that enemy because it killed a player in that other person's game, and it tells you that you've got an empowered enemy, and then when you kill them, they drop like all this extra loot.
Shadow of Mordor.
Like, Shadow of Hodor.
But no, like straight up, like in Shadow of Mordor, it's like once they beat you and you respawn, next time you go up against them, they might have ranked up or they might be more powerful.
That's right. I remember
they've got your notch on their belt. So this is kind of, again, yeah, I knew that was like ringing a bell for some reason.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's kind of a mix of that and Dark Souls with the kind of like crossing over with other people's games.
Yeah, it's got that very much so. Now, in terms of the crossing over into people's games, because I don't have a lot of criticisms for this game, to be perfectly honest. It's the kind of game that I'm playing through, and there's nothing I really dislike about it that's glaringly obvious. The only criticism is that on release, they promised something called invasion mode, which is when another player can spawn as a demon in your campaign playthrough and essentially fight you. And so that's something that is still slated to come into the game in a future update. So I'm really, really hanging out for that. But it's just unfortunate it's not in the game already, because I really love that idea. And that's very much in line with that Dark Souls multiplayer or player campaign crossover situation. So hopefully that comes out really, really soon. I probably won't talk about it on the pod, but yeah, I'm really, really hoping to be able to play the game probably again when that comes out, perhaps from the demon perspective, because there's a lot of unlocks that you get. It's not all just doing it for the sake of doing it. Basically, everything in the game has some kind of reward or purpose. But quickly on that, there's also another mode called Battle Mode, which is, I haven't played it yet, but it's more of like an arena sort of like multiplayer mode where you've got demons versus slayers. And that is, I haven't seen too much in regards of that info wise. But that's something I'll get into after the game. One very last thing that I want to mention that I find kind of interesting is it's actually got a battle pass. Doom Eternal has a battle pass. It's free. Everyone gets access to it. But basically, there's a bunch of challenges that come out each week, a bunch of different skins and seasons. So, each season, I think the one at the moment is like the Halloween season. So you can do these challenges in battle mode or campaign, and you unlock different skins for your player, different demon skins, different icons and backgrounds and things. So it's a cool little addition that they've added in, and it gives the game that air of replayability, because the player base is still huge for Doom Eternal, even after the campaign got finished by initial players. I got really glad to hear.
I like the kind of marketing genius of a battle pass that is free and everyone who buys the game has it. So in effect, it's just
weird, right?
It's just the game.
Yeah, it is just the game.
But call it a battle pass and people feel like they get more value.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely correct. But it does add a lot in the ways of wanting to play things again, wanting to do things on harder difficulty, wanting to play other game modes, because all these different aspects of the game have a reward associated with them. So yeah, that is my experience with Doom Eternal so far. And yeah, like I said, really, really loving it.
All right, so I know that I have spoken about this one before on the podcast, but it's the only thing I've been playing this week because I kind of just put it down and got distracted by other things because it's such a big game. And I've gotten back into it in the biggest way now. It's one of those I can't put it down games at the moment. I am talking about Zelda Breath of the Wild. And when I stopped playing it last time, I think you could generously estimate that I'd maybe played a quarter of it based on, I had defeated one of the 4 divine beasts that you have to beat before you can go up against the big boss. I don't know if I'm going to find more stuff once I've beaten all the divine beasts that's going to slow me down, or if there's that many side quests and stuff that a quarter is actually, a lot more than what I thought. But I'd done one of those 4 and was really enjoying it. But like I said, such a big game, such a big time commitment that I wasn't going to not play anything else that was coming out until I'd finished it. And I kind of never went back. I kept finding new things. But I think I mentioned on the last episode, Paul, that the boys had been like watching YouTube videos of it and like playing their own playthrough and stuff, and occasionally asking me for help and stuff. And just from me picking it back up and playing it here and there, I have found myself falling back in love with the game. Like, it's such a good game, you guys.
I a little mouse told me, Timmy. A little internet told me that you can waste a lot of time in this game just like walking around and doing exploring and just sort of doing a bit of like a Shadow Colossus thing where you really don't have any objective and you're just sort of cruising. Is
Yeah,
that
dude.
you found
Yeah.
that?
The world is so well designed and built that, like, not only is it just pleasant moving around, like, it looks great, it sounds great. There are a variety of different ways to get around. You unlock new abilities that make getting about easier. As you go, you get more stamina, and you can actively add to your stamina so that you can climb further or glide for longer and stuff like that. So not only is it just fun getting around the world, it's kind of like if I'm standing on a tower or in a town and I can see a mountain that has a single tree at the very top of it, there's probably going to be something there. If I am gliding from somewhere to somewhere else and I see like some stones arranged in a way that doesn't seem like a natural formation, there's probably going to be something there. It might be big, it might be small, it might be something that an NPC has asked me to find. It might just be, a strange creature lives there that I can interact with. But just like this whole world, everything is something, and not in a like it's jam packed and it's too easy to find stuff. It's just like, it's the anti Assassin's Creed. You know how we were talking about how you look at the little map in that and it's got, oops, there's a sea shanty, there's a shop, there's a side mission, there's your target, there's this thing to collect, there's that, there's this, there's that, and there's 1,000 things in there. On the Zelda map, there's next to nothing. Like, you can stamp things yourself, but you still only have about 8 total stamps you can use that'll show up on your mini map. Nothing else shows up apart from like if it's a stable you've already found or a shrine or a tower you've already found. No, like you can't see that there's someone there who has a mission for you. You can't see that there might be a collectible here. It's all looking at it in the world, and so you feel really accomplished finding these things. And so you're absolutely right, JT. You can sink so much time into it, and then like it takes on another level because perhaps you've stumbled into an area and just by being in that area you are burning to death. So all of a sudden, like, all right, well, now I found this area and it's cool, but I can't go there. So I'm going to have to explore and find some whatever armor I need to be able to survive in this area, or whatever elixir I need to be able to survive in this area.
Being that there is not that Ubisoft Assassin's Creed sort of dilemma with an overload of information, how have you gone with that exploring, and like have you found yourself going online for guides, or are you just happy to go with what you find? Like how have you been handling that?
It's a mix. Generally exploring and stuff, like, I there is a very much a puzzle solving element to a lot of it. Like, a lot of the quests are like, hey, this weird bard sang me this song, and I'm sure it means something, but I can't work it out. And you get the lyrics to a song or an old folk tale about something or other. And if you can put it together, you can probably unlock a shrine or something like that. And, most of them like are pretty fun to work out yourself. I have occasionally looked up guides in like boss battles, just because like most of the boss battles in Breath of the Wild are like the kind of bosses when they have like a routine. And so sometimes I've been like, I can't work out how I can attack him now that he's standing up there in a force field shooting fireballs at me. Like, what am I meant to do here? So I've looked up a guide, and it turns out if I used a specific power, then he gets shocked and it's fine. So I have looked at guides because like there's just so much in it. Like I don't feel bad about it, and if I get totally stumped, I will. But in terms of the exploring and just trying to find stuff, I haven't felt the need to do it because, like you said, it's just enjoyable to sink time into exploring.
I know you said that you hadn't finished the game first time round, so you're kind of like working back towards that. Have they added new content since the game came out? Like, I think we talked very, very briefly last week about the fact that they're bringing out a sort of like pseudo sequel sort of thing at some point in the future. But has there been anything added to Breath of the Wild?
I genuinely don't know. I haven't looked. Like I don't need anything added to it. It's so big and so full. And like I say it's full, but there are still times where I'm having to trek on foot across the desert, like, and there's just no quick way to do it, sort of thing, So it's not like I'm going to keep bumping into things, and it's not full in that way. It's just alive,
I love that though. I love that. Like, I haven't played this game, but I've watched a lot of other people playing it, and I do love, like you said before, that it has that sense of like that example you just gave of sort of trekking across the desert. It's like things aren't just all one on top of each other to make the gameplay experience as sort of quick and streamlined as possible. It feels like you're supposed to almost appreciate the nothingness about it as well, which I kind of really like. That, you don't have to have a thing in every area. You can just have kind of like a big grass plain, and part of the experience is that you have to cross that to get to something else.
Yeah, and they do a really good job of, like I said, making that enjoyable. Like the sound and the feel of the grass. Like I remember when I first spoke about it, I kept using the word zen because it is really calming at times. Like when there's no enemies around, it's a really relaxing game to play. One thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned like kind of like the physics and the cooking and stuff the last time, and how that was a really cool system. But the system I've been paying attention to a lot this time is the weapons and the way that no one weapon lasts. What I mean by that is no matter how strong a weapon you get, eventually it will break if you keep using it in this game. And it's not like it breaks and then you can fix it. Once it breaks, it's gone, smashes into 1,000 pieces. And the thing I actually surprisingly really like about this is that Link doesn't have a level in this. Like you can increase how many heart containers he has, and you can get better armor. But my best armor I've upgraded to have an armor rating of like 12, and most things are kind of start around 3, and I've got some 5s and some 8s, so it really doesn't change that much. The big difference is how much damage you can do. And so what I have found is, so that you're not just becoming more and more powerful and they're having to gatekeep you from certain areas so that you don't get up against the really hard enemies, or you don't like completely destroy everything weak and then move on and have no reason to go back once you're strong or whatever, is you get a really good weapon, and you kind of want to save that for when you come across a boss or someone tough. And so you kind of use the middle range weapons, which keeps all the mid range enemies and monsters kind of still at a challenging level. So you never get that rolling around the countryside being totally overpowered kind of vibe. And I think it's balanced really, really nicely, and it's a very interesting mechanic.
The breaking weapons thing, that's really intriguing. I like the sound of that. I'm interested in how much can you plan for that? Because I know the game has kind of like an inventory type system, right? You collect a bunch of things and you can do some crafting. Can you kind of like future-proof yourself against that by, say, stocking up on a bunch of weapons you know you like? Like if there's a sword you like, can you get like 5 of them so you've got them there ready to go? Or like more interestingly, I'm kind of thinking, does it force you to say, well, shit, that sword's broken. I'm going to have to pick up this axe and it plays differently, but I've just got to go with that.
Yeah, there's a bit of both. You can future-proof to a point. There's a couple of places that you can buy weapons from, and you need to scavenge the parts, and you need to pay through the nose. They're expensive, and you need to have the parts for it as well. Weapons you can find throughout the world, kind of dropped in various places in a chest and stuff, but it's not a good method to rely on that. The place you get most weapons from is from killing enemies with weapons, and then you can pick up theirs. And so that, again, if you want a better weapon, it encourages you to go up against a harder enemy. And I'm kind of sharing my save with Grayson, our eldest at the moment. And, you know, he's 6 and he loves playing it, but he just like wants to use the coolest weapons and we'll just use them till they break. And so there's been a couple of times where we found ourselves in dire situations in which I've had like no weapons, only my bow and arrow perhaps. And so I've had to go and find somebody that I can take down with just a bow and arrow and then get their weapon. And that's not very strong. So I'm kind of slowly working my way up. There's also an element of those weapons I said that you could purchase and you need to scavenge the parts. The only enemies that drop those are called guardians, and them generally the hardest enemies you'll find in the wild. They're like these robot things that can shoot you with a sniper shot from so far away. So you have to get to them quickly, and you have to take out their legs, and you have to have cover to avoid the charges the laser beam that they're charging up, and then you have to dart back in again, and they can cut straight through your armor. So it's really tough, and they move very quickly. So again, it's a way of balancing it. I can get these super tough weapons, but they're expensive, and I have to go up against tough enemies to get them. So, I don't necessarily want to use my tough weapons against them. So then I'm setting myself up for a challenge so I can get the parts, so we can get better weapons, because I know I'm going to go do a boss battle soon. And I only have, I think it's like, is it 8 melee weapon slots? Sometimes I'll find that I'm in an area and I've got all these weapons I like, but I really need to pick up a torch because it's dark and I need to light a bunch of lamps. So I have to pick one to drop so I can pick up this torch, which only I can use as a weapon, but it's weak as hell, so stuff like that.
It sounds great. It sounds like exactly the kind of mechanic I love in games. The kind of thing where you can't just say, well, this is the best thing, I'll use this for the rest of the game, where you're forced to make choices constantly.
Yeah, I honestly really, really like it a lot, and it's little things like this that win me over. And although kind of how I've described it probably makes it sound like more of a hindrance to a lot of people, the thing that it actually lets you do is this game has that thing where it's never going to stop you from trying anything. You can march up to the end boss straight away. You'll probably get flattened, but if you were really committed to doing it as quickly as possible, like speed running this game, you could stock up on food and cook the recipes that give you extra hearts. So even though you might only have 6 heart containers naturally, you can eat all this food that will give you bonus hearts, and then all of a sudden maybe you've got 10, 12 that you normally wouldn't have until much later in the game. And once you lose them, they're gone, but there are certain foods that give you temporary heart containers. And if you know where to look for certain weapons, and you can be quick and avoid enemies instead of simply like fighting them and then getting the chest kind of thing, you could potentially get way overpowered weapons for kind of where you are in the game, and you could speedrun it and get in there early. You could just have heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of food or elixirs and stuff, and just like keep taking the hits. And as long as they don't kill you in one hit, you can open your inventory with a button press and it pauses everything and eat the food to get your health back up, like kind of like how in dare I say it, The Witcher, how you can prepare for a battle and take on something much more high leveled, or you can wait until you've boosted up Geralt's stats in general and go in and take it easy. You can do that in Zelda, but there's no like nothing's got level ratings, you know? All you can see is like that weapon is more powerful than the other one, you know? And I really like that. I really like you can choose to be prepared, or you can, you know, just wait until you've got a heaps of heart containers from playing the game for hundreds of hours.
I'm glad we got our Witcher reference in there.
But, yeah, had to do it.
I'm getting maybe like Elder Scrolls vibes a little bit from the way you're describing it. Maybe more so the older games like Morrowind that were maybe a bit more open, but would have the same kind of thing where you sort of just like you're just given a bunch of systems, and it's kind of like if you can combine these together to like get into this area and fight these things, then you go for it. You know, they're not going to like gate off anything and say that's for level 15 and above. And I really like that kind of design.
There's that great video, Paul, just on that Morrowind, and Tim, as Timmy was describing that, I was like, I'm having flashbacks to the guy who speed runs Morrowind by just taking a bunch of potions at the start of the game, flying or jumping, so like buffering his jump skill that he jumps to the end boss and one punches him, and it's like totally legitimate as to how he does it. And so yeah, it's just like obviously, you know, you probably take a bit more thinking or well thought planning in Zelda, but it's that same kind of thing. And yeah, the systems allow you to do it. So, you know, if it's there.
But yeah, it's like a world-class RPG, but all of the systems are hidden. You know how like in RPGs, a lot of the time it's number games and you can min-max everything?
Mm-hmm.
It's like an RPG that's just not showing you the numbers. And I don't mean that it's obfuscating anything or it's keeping it from you. It's just that's not the point of this game. It makes it feel much more real world.
It makes
even
sense.
Though it's
It makes sense though, right? It's like that design philosophy in terms of, like you say, kind of the stats is in line with their philosophy in terms of the map as well, right? It's like it's not about looking at the map and, you know, filling in all the circles you haven't done. It's about literally looking at the world and just, you know, choosing where you want to go. It's really cool.
Exactly. So yeah, like I just wanted to bring it up again because like I think I've decided it's far and away the best game that exists for the Nintendo Switch. Easily my favorite. And it's making its way into like my top 10 games of all time for me. Like I'm just, like I said, I can't put it down at the moment. I am enjoying it as much handheld as I do when I plug it into the TV. Like I'm getting as much out of rolling around and doing little things and like going to a little village and finishing a mission where some farmer's lost his chickens and I have to get the chickens back into a coop, as much as I am defeating a divine beast and flying around the skies, like shooting bomb arrows at this big mechanical bird that's tormenting a whole continent, you know, like it's the scale's great and I love everything about it.
Yeah, I've outside of Pokemon, I barely played my Switch since I bought it, but every time I think about playing the Switch or say there's like a new game that's released that I think like, oh, maybe I should get that, the thing I always come back to is, no, I need to get Breath of the Wild.
Absolutely. Trust that instinct, Paul.
Well, that's what you've been playing, Timmy. And JT, we talked about Doom for you, so I should probably talk a little bit about what I've been playing. And a few weeks ago, now on the pod, I talked about the latest F1 game, F1 2020. I've been putting a bit more time into that and kind of checking out some of the other modes in that game. So when we first discussed this, I talked about how this version of the game introduces a mode called My Team, where you get to create your own F1 team and you kind of make the livery that goes on the car and you sort of pick the colors and all that kind of stuff. And you pretty much start from scratch as like the bottom team and you work your way up. And at the time I talked about how I wasn't really that interested in that mode because when I kind of play my sim games, if they're about real world stuff, I like them to be really realistic. So if I'm playing an F1 game, I want all the teams to be real teams. Or if I'm playing like a football game, I'm kind of the same way. But for one reason or another, I decided I would kind of like dip my toe into the My Team mode, and I'd create a team and like see what was actually in there that was interesting. And I have been having such a good time with it. I'm very happy to say that I was completely wrong about how much that mode would appeal to me, because I am loving the extra depth that it has in terms of managing your team and things like that. I thought that the kind of making up a new team would bother me in terms of it not being realistic, but just the extra kind of gameplay systems are absolutely worth it.
Is it enough for you to feel like you're like actually taking part in the F1 experience, or it doesn't feel like too tacked on? I understand something can be substantial but still feel like, you mentioned before, can still feel a bit contrived. Does it go past that for you?
I absolutely understand what you mean by that, but this feels like the My Team mode is the experience that you should be having when you play this game. So after playing this, I feel like the standard career mode feels just too shallow, and it feels like it's lacking features. So the standard mode has it has all the driving stuff that's in there as normal. So on-track stuff is the same. Off-track, you're in control of research and development. So you gain points throughout the season, and then you choose how your car develops. In the My Team mode, you add on to that the control of your actual like facilities off the track. So you not only do the driving, you control the R&D, but you invest money into the different facilities that develop the car. And that does things like it increases the speed of your R&D, it reduces the chance that it fails, it gives you extra bonuses like that. You also get to choose what sponsors are sponsoring your car, and those sponsors give you... there's actually a really cool system. Each sponsor gives you a goal. So you may have a sponsor that simply just says something like they want you to drive 50 laps in a race weekend. And maybe they give you like $100,000 a week to do that. But then another sponsor will say, we'll give you $250,000 a week, but you only get that if you finish in the top 10. So you can kind of, you can set your team up for like easy money, but it's not a lot, or you can kind of push yourself and try and make a bit more, but it's going to be a challenge. And going back to the career mode after playing My Team, it feels like, not having those sponsorship goals feels like there's less to aim for in a race, and not having control over the team's facilities. It just, like, I know the experience is supposed to be in the other mode that you're just a driver, but that feels like a negative at that point. It feels like, oh, I'm just a driver, but I can't really guide whether this team is kind of, say, a team that goes for a good engine or a team that has really good downforce. Whereas in My Team, that's what I'm doing. With My Team, I kind of went, all right, I want to make a car that is very, very fast in a straight line and is not as good through the corners, so that when we come to tracks that are more about power than downforce, then I will overperform in those tracks. And I can kind of like over the season, I can sort of plan my strategy. If I know that there's a race coming up which suits my car, then I can do that. And you can do that to an extent in the normal career mode, but just not the way you can in My Team. Like there's just so much depth to it.
So yeah, it certainly sounds like that is the game. When they were making this game, they were like, My Team is where, we're going to focus on building a great game. Does it like when you first load up the game, does it seem like, oh, this My Team thing is just a thing they've added on, so I'm not going to check it? Or is it kind of like, because if I'm comparing it to, say, like my partner's son's been getting into NBA 2K21, they've got a similar sort of mode. It's like where you make your team. And that mode is definitely like at the forefront of all the menus and how it's presented in the game. So there's no confusing it with anything else. It's like, okay, that's what the game wants me to be playing right now. Is it a bit like that? Is it similar?
Yeah, it's similar in the sense that it's really foregrounded in all of the kind of marketing and the menus. And I think I think my kind of misguided skepticism about that mode came from years and years of playing yearly iterations of FIFA, where FIFA adds a new mode every year, and they're always crap. Like FIFA basically has two modes. It has like a single player mode and a multiplayer mode, and every year they try and add some other thing like a story mode or like a street soccer mode, and they're always just half-assed and really terrible. And I think I kind of thought that that's what this was, that this was their kind of gimmick feature for this year. But yeah, I'm like delighted to say that, like, you put it really well before when you said, like, this is the game. Like, this is what they want people to play.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, judging by, I think your opinion is a pretty good gauge of where F1 games are, just in terms of your knowledge of the sport, but also in terms of how that sport should be presented in a game. So it sounds like this is something that hopefully is going to be sticking around. Like, this is just going to be a staple for the game. If it's successful enough, which it sounds like it's if it's a hit with you, I'm sure it's a hit with a lot of other players of the genre too.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of like making how much you can make of kind of online reaction is debatable, but I have seen a lot of online reaction saying that people want these features to be available in just the normal career. So rather than rather than making like disc and dice racing and being able to control all the facilities and stuff, what people also want is to be able to take over Ferrari and control Ferrari in that way. Whereas if you play as one of the real life teams, you don't have control over all that stuff. So I think maybe, or I hope that perhaps in future iterations of this, that's where it goes, that you sort of see these features expanded to the rest of the game.
Yeah, it sounds like that's something that I think a lot of racing games, it's present in a lot of sports games, but racing games in particular, where there's this huge team and everyone is very, very important, and there's different layers and levels to that team. It seems like that's sort of where the future of the racing sim genre is going to go, because I think people love the management side as much as they do the actual racing.
Yeah, totally true. I think that Motorsport Manager game has really blown up a lot in the last few years, and we've talked a lot about Forza here, and I think Forza is the kind of game where the focus is just 100% on like the racing, and the off-track stuff is not so important. And I've really enjoyed the way that it's 50-50 here, I would say. You care about driving on the track and stuff like that, but I care just as much about how my team is developing. One other cool thing along those lines is every team has two drivers in a Formula One team. When you play the normal career mode, not my team, you are one driver, and really whoever your teammate is just doesn't matter. Like, it has no impact on you. Like, they're just another driver you need to beat. Whereas in the My Team mode, you really care about your second driver because you still want to beat them. But the way research and development works, I mentioned this last time, is you gain points in practice sessions to spend to develop your car. If you have a crappy second driver, they don't gain as many points in a practice session. So it becomes important to you to either spend a lot of money to hire a good second driver or invest money in developing that driver so that they can perform more. And it's just little things like that. Like, two drivers in a team is important, and this mode makes you actually care about that in a way that the other one didn't.
So I'm actually curious as well. So with this My Team mode, can you recruit other drivers from other teams? Do you have a bit of control over, say, like drafting, some real world people into your team? Is that something they've added in there?
Do you mean real world people in terms of like multiplayer, or like as in getting, Lewis Hamilton on your team?
Yeah, if you were to have Lewis Hamilton on your team, like someone from another team, is this like multiplayer only, or?
No. It's all single player, and yeah, you can. So what basically happens is, I think every driver is on like a 6-month contract, So you start your season and you've got you, and then you hire a second driver. So I actually hired Michael Schumacher's son, who is like a real life driver in the division below Formula
Yeah.
One, but he's like super cheap because he's just a rookie. But then every 6 months you have contract negotiations, and you can choose to keep your driver or you can choose to switch, and all of the real drivers are available for you to kind of bid on. And it's an interesting system. It's a pretty shallow system. Basically, you can bid like low, medium, or high, and then your chance of them agreeing increases or decreases, and it's just a bit of a dice roll whether you get them. So, it's not a great system. It's kind of like if you've got the money, you always just want to bid high because your chance increases. There's not much more to it. But, it's entirely possible that you can play for a couple of seasons, and then, if you've got a driver you really like in real life, you can try and get them to join your created team in the game and stuff like that, which is cool, So you get like, I can get that real world F1 vibe with my made up team. The only other thing I wanted to mention about the game, which is a bit of a negative, and I don't think I mentioned this last time, is that since I've put a bit more time into it, is that I feel like the difficulty is very variable in the game, and on certain tracks it will feel like the AI are incredibly fast and I just can't get near them, and on other tracks I will be like really, really fast and like competing for top 3 places and things like that. And a little bit of that is that my car is not kind of balanced in terms of its development, but it just feels like it swings too far one way or the other and things like that. And there's some inconsistencies in the game where you have things like in qualifying on certain tracks, the AI will be incredibly fast and I won't be able to get anywhere near the top 10. But then in the actual race, I spend the whole race passing cars because I'm faster than them. It's just little inconsistencies like that they take away from the game a little bit. So I feel like there's probably some tweaking there in terms of the stats of the AI behind the scenes to try and sort of get that stuff so it feels like the way you do it is you have a scale from 1 to 100 and you pick where you are on that scale in terms of your difficulty, and it basically just makes the AI faster for every point that you give them. But it's just not consistent enough. So, I find that I would like to just put it on one setting and then leave it on that, but I find I kind of have to move it up and down across the season, which is just a little bit annoying. It's a bit more fiddly than you really want.
Yeah, I could imagine that would get under my skin. Like I want a game, especially if it's a racing game, where you spend a lot of time, especially on a track where you're doing circuits. That would probably really annoy me because I want the consistency of the race to be there.
Yeah, totally. And it's like it gives you that like the really granular difficulty scale, which I get they give you that because they wanted to give players like, total control. Like arguably you could say this game has 100 difficulty settings, because it's like a 100 points of scale. But I don't know, it may have just been better to go with like an easy, medium, or hard kind of thing. I think maybe they were a bit ambitious there. But, anyway. Overall though, like I'm really enjoying this game. Like I'll take my hat off to them for the My Team mode. I was absolutely wrong about that one, and I'm having so much fun with it. But there are other F1 games around. It's not just the official licensed console one that people can play. And while I've been loving this one, JT, you've been delving into the F1 offerings on mobile, and from conversations we've had before, this is going to be a bit of a laugh.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to hear that your F1 experience has been excellent. I'm very happy for you. I made a terrible mistake downloading the official F1 Manager mobile app. I thought I was going to be in for a treat because of a couple episodes or a few episodes ago, you mentioned the F1 Manager game that you were playing. And I was like, that sounds awesome. I'm never really gone into a management game before, but look, I'm happy to give it a go on mobile. I'm sure it'll, be a bit more stripped back, but I'm fine with that. And it is just ads. It is an ad simulator. If you want to do anything in the game, you have to watch ads. You have to watch usually like 6 or 7 ads in a row if you want to have enough money to pay to race. It's like, you want to race? Okay, you need coins. And it's like, well, that's not realistic. I don't think they have to put a bag of coins on the table every time they want to race in real F1. And so you're constantly watching ads and slowly getting like, morsels of this in-game currency so that you can actually race. And then you manage to do a race, you thrash the opponents because there are so many terrible players out there. There is zero contest. And the management aspect of it is just like, it's not a game. Like, as far as I'm concerned, this is not a game. This is a way for the official F1 team to obviously just throw their brand out there and make a little bit of money from people making purchases. And obviously add income as well. It's, look, just don't touch it. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's just a bad experience all around.
You can't pay to be ad free at all.
No, that's what annoys me the most. If there was an option, so if I could pay maybe like, look, before I go into that, the game itself, when you're not watching ads, leaves a lot to be desired. It's like loot crates every 3 seconds. It's like, oh, you haven't played in a while. Here's 3 loot crates, and you earn some coins. And you see it's that type of game where it's like, it throws all these like, flashy things at you. It's like, oh, you unlock this, and you've got some coins here, and like everything's sparkling and exploding and things. And you're like, cool, I'm progressing in the game. But in actual reality, you're not getting that much. It's giving you the bare minimum to continue playing the game so you can watch the ads and hope that you fork some money into it. But if there was a premium version where there were no ads or anything, I'd probably give it more of a go. I think the player base would probably be a bit more challenging because it would include people who are legitimately playing the game. But it's just not really an F1 management game. It's a shell. It's just like a branding thing. It's like a brand with some buttons on it, and every now and then you go into a race where you choose how fast your car goes around corners and tell it when to pit every now and then that's it. And so there's very, very actual gameplay involved in this so-called game.
I'm curious about the ads. So if there are so many ads, are they at least like somewhat relevant to anything, or are they just like, is it just like total crapshoot random ads? Like
random ads.
Yeah.
It's other games usually. I think they're all from other games on the mobile platform. So it's like, play Age of Kings today. They've always got those like spin-off names that always sound the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: you don't have to watch the ads, but the ads are the way you get income to start a race. So you win some money from winning a race, but it's not enough to upgrade your driver. It's not enough to continue and go into another race. If you wanted to play the game without watching ads, you could maybe do like 1 or 2 races, and then you'd have to just start paying money for the coins. So it really forces you to either pay money or watch the ads. And that's the only way you can really do anything in the game.
Yeah, I kind of wondered whether it would be like a series of ads from people who are like commercial partners of Formula One, so it's ads for like Rolex and Pirelli and things like that. But it's, that would at least be like, on brand and thematic.
Yeah.
But no.
Yeah. It take you, obviously not to say it's a crazy immersive game to begin with, but you're playing an F1 game, you're in race mode, you're like, I want to do some car stuff. And then up comes an ad for like a fantasy game where you have to kill demons. And, there's like 6 of those in a row. And by the time you've finished watching all your ads and you've got your coins, you're like, I don't really feel like playing car stuff anymore. And you turn the game off. So, yeah. I've got a very, very impartial relationship with mobile gaming in general. It's very rare that I really touch mobile games because I just find them generally hard to play and hard to get into. But this really did no favors for my opinion on mobile gaming. Let's just put it that way.
Is it the best ad simulator that you have played this year?
Like,
you'd have to say no, right? Because it's not simulating the ads; they're real ads, so it fails on that count as well.
Well, Timmy's touched on something. There's, how we were. I think we've talked about in the past about how there's all these really niche simulation games. There's like Farming Simulator and Goat Simulator and like American Trucker Simulator. I think Timmy's got a bit of a business opportunity at hand here. He can get a team together and make Ad Simulator, where it's. I mean, I don't know what you do, but
I feel like that game, like, isn't that like. It's like a licensed Mad Men game, and it's like a sim hospital theme park style thing where you run an ad agency, right? Like that's what that game is, and it's probably actually quite good.
You know what? You've actually jigged my memory a little bit, because I often go on a bit of a binge and just looking through the Steam store in some of the genres. And I actually think there is something somewhat close to that. When you mentioned advertisement campaign, like advertisement management, I feel like, it might not be a simulator, but it's like something pretty close to working in an office and doing something really mundane. And I feel like there probably are a bunch of those games out there.
There's a game for everything now, right?
There is a game for everything. You know what we need? We need the disc and dice game. If Penny Arcade can make their own game, there's nothing stopping us three from making the disc and dice podcast game. Coming out first quarter 2022.
Well, I think JT has just committed to being to heading up that endeavor. So thank you, JT, for volunteering to be our project manager.
Yeah, it came to me while I had some time off. In
reflecting on your sins.
Yeah, in the corrections facility.
It occurred to me that what we should have done was like asked him to explain to the viewers what had happened, but before like we told him anything.
That's a good point, actually. We'll do that next time he misses an episode, because he won't listen to it.
Yeah, guaranteed. But hey, JT, next time you're not listening to an episode, do you reckon that might be because you're playing some other games and you want to tell us what you're planning on playing?
You know what?
This flawless segue.
I was going to say, this question, even though on our chat right now you've made a mention to prompt what we could be playing, I just totally vagued out, and I actually legitimately have not thought about this at all. Well, since before this podcast. I don't know what I'm going to be playing. I'm going to be finishing Doom Eternal, but that's like, probably another 2 hours. I have nothing. I think for the first time in my life, I have open season on games. I have nothing
looks
to
like
play.
You're going to have to stick with the official F1 manager app.
Hey, maybe maybe they can redeem themselves with a sequel.
You know how there's those, they're usually JRPGs where everyone's like, oh man, it gets so good after like 30 to 40 hours. Maybe the F1 game is like that. You just got to push through the ads.
Incredible.
Yeah. The ads after 20 hours, they are so good.
They become so relevant. It's amazing.
But hey, look, I can jump in if JT's got nothing, because I am going to be playing the new FIFA game, which comes out tomorrow. So I'm eagerly anticipating that. I didn't think I'd play it, but it's kind of got its hooks into me and just the idea of it. So I'm going to be playing that, and I'll have some things to say about that next episode. The other thing I'm going to be playing, which, JT, maybe this is something that you will remember now that you are possibly interested in, is I'm thinking about maybe getting Star Wars Squadrons, the new Star Wars flight sim. In the time between now and next episode. It will probably depend on whether I hear it's got a couple of patches for PC before then, as
Yeah.
to whether I get it soon or in maybe a month or so. But yeah, I've been hearing some good things about that, and it's real cheap. It's not really a full price game, and that's tempting me. So yeah, JT, I think you're on the same page. We talked about this before.
Yeah. My answer before is what he said. There we go.
For me, it's going to be, I reckon I'm closing in on the end of Zelda. So I'm going to play some more of that. Obviously, like I said, I can't stop. So it'll be that until I feel compelled to stop. But other than that, once again, this episode, Shadow's been playing Fall Guys while I record. And there's a little timer on the screen that says Season 2 starts in about an hour. And the menu screens have already updated, and apparently there's some new music and stuff. And I was just saying today, after we played a bunch, like it'd be nice if they got some more songs, because like they're really fun songs, but we've heard the 2 or 3 that there are in the game about 1,000 times now. So looking forward to jumping into that, seeing what Season 2 has to offer.
So you're saying we got to wrap this up because that starts in an hour?
Hell yeah.
Well, we're just going to jump to a quick break before coming back into the last hour of the podcast.
That is absolutely not what we're doing.
Cool. Look, hey, if you guys want to tell JT why he's wrong about the F1 app and why it is in fact the world's best ad simulator, you can get in touch with us in a variety of ways. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. Pretty much search for Disc and Dice and you'll find us. On Instagram, it is Disc and Dice Podcast. If you want to send us an email, you can get to us at discanddice@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'll answer any questions you have. If you want to hear our thoughts on a certain game or whatever it might be, let us know and we'll be more than happy to chat about it. The best way to chat with us, though, is on the Raptor Mountain Discord server, which is a Discord server we are part of with our good friend Rogan Josh, who you might know from YouTube and Twitch. We have our own channel on there. We let you know what we're going to be talking about. You can let us know any questions about those specific things, just like the emails. You can let us know what you want to hear about. Just have a bit of a chat with us and be a part of the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Link for that is on all of our socials, but you can get it specifically from our bio on Instagram if you need. Other than that, though, we're going to get to playing some games and we will catch up with you in a fortnight. Thanks for listening.
See you later.
Bye.
Who is the person who has Disc and Dice on Instagram?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just some random.
It's like the person who has Brinty Spears, like, you know how I spell it wrong. I have to do an underscore at the end. It's pissing me off. And they've got like no followers. They don't do anything. It's like, give it up. Come on.